One of my interests lies quite heavily in World War II propaganda cartoons. I think they're so fascinating to study. I've seen quite a few of them. I've seen several from Disney, and Education for Death, the 1943 film, is definitely one of the most disturbing and perhaps accurate. And while it is propaganda against Germany and arguably racist in some points, when does propaganda become racism? It's a very fine line. This isn't racist, but well, maybe it is. I don't know. Propaganda is a very different thing of its own. But this one focuses not just on Hitler, but on the general public in Germany at the time. And the actual subtitle is The Making of the Nazi. And it's all about the Hitler Youth and how once a young boy joins the Hitlerjugend, they're basically being raised and bred to fight for Germany. And we all know how that ended up for a lot of soldiers. And it's a pretty emotional thing when you're watching it because, yes, this was the enemy, but these are young boys, and there's some really disturbing, actually, animation of these boys who are maybe about 8 or 9 in the Hitlerjugend doing Heil Hitler, and we know that when they grow up, they're going to have a certain fate. There's this beautiful mini montage of these little boys marching. This is quite near the end, but they're marching, and then they are kind of older men, old teenagers marching, and then they're kitted out in their soldier uniform, marching with their guns over their shoulders. And it's a beautiful transition to watch on screen, but in real life, that's obviously a pretty powerful thing. That's not very pleasant, and this really makes you think that soldiers who went out to fight for either side were once just young innocent children who had not yet been indoctrinated into the Hitlerjugend, and I feel like that's pretty powerful. This particularly follows the character of Hans, who we meet as a baby, and at the birth of this baby, the parents are given a copy of Mein Kampf, and well, there's a hint that they're meant to be producing a lot more children to join the Hitlerjugend to go and fight for the fatherland. And we see Hans growing up from a young boy, and I'm not going to say how the story ends, but it's called Education for Death. The main point is, while the Germans, and this is where the racism question comes in, are they saying that it's just the Nazis who are this way inclined, or is it the general public as well? It's a very fine line. But we watch Hans growing up, and while to the Nazis, Hans is being prepared to fight for his country, to the onlooker, Hans is being indoctrinated within the Hitlerjugend to go and fight to the death. And it's a little bit emotional when you think of it like that. I think it's really clever that they gave us this character of Hans, who we can then follow from basically being a baby. He is a pure Aryan, if you like, and we follow him through the Hitler Youth to being old enough to go and fight, and it's quite emotional. I think it works very well. I don't know what the general public would have thought for this at the time, because on the one hand it's kind of saying the Germans are breeding their young children to go and do this and they will eventually die in the war. Kind of saying, we're better than the Germans, we will kill them all. But at the same time, you're kind of saying, I'm going to go and kill that child one day. And that's not a positive message at all. So I'm not sure really what the message the film was trying to give. I feel like, mostly with Disney propaganda for the war, it was all about Hitler being a bad person and, we must fight. Well, I'm not American, but they must fight against Nazi Germany and defeat her Hitler. But with this one, it kind of like, to me, it's like they're saying, look at what is happening to these children. Look at what these idiots are doing to their youth and indoctrinating them. This war needs to stop. So for me, I perceive it quite differently to a lot of other Disney cartoons from the time, and indeed other 1940s propaganda animations. It's really interesting. I will say there are animated portraits, and the one of Hitler is creepy. The one of Goering is creepy. The one of Goebbels is probably one of the most terrifying things that I have ever seen. It is a very powerful short. It's about 10 minutes, and it basically encapsulates everything you will learn about the Second World War in a child-friendly way. I say child-friendly, it's probably not child-friendly, but by that I mean you don't see people getting lynched and there are no concentration camps. It kind of, you know, it's a nasty thing, but it doesn't necessarily show it blunt force. It's everything you'd learn in the first year of secondary school studying the Second World War, but encapsulated within 10 minutes, and it works very well. The characters are all speaking German in this. I speak some German, so I could understand some of what they were saying, but I think to the younger audience or to anybody who's never studied German at the time, that inability to understand and perceive what these characters were saying is going to add an extra element of fear, because we fear the unknown. And I just think it's done it very brilliantly. It's absolutely fascinating to watch today. I imagine it would have been very emotive, very moving, and very powerful propaganda at the time in 1943. I kind of feel like the Donald Duck one is still my favourite, but Education for Death is nevertheless pretty awesome.